Alright, welcome back to another episode of our Discord dashboard series. So in the last episode, we just pretty much created the user band card, which is this little component over here. And I know I said something where when we click on the card, we're going to make it so that when we click on the card, it's going to navigate us to the next page and it'll show more information and there will be a button to allow us to unband the user. I think that's going to be kind of pointless because, to be honest with you, there's really not much information that we should display unless if you actually saved your own information. Then it would make sense, but even then it wouldn't make sense to display that information under the bands path, right? You can, if you want, you can create like your own custom page, like something like, slash dashboard slash slash guilds, and then you could paste in the guild ID, paste in like slash members, for example, and then get the member ID, etc., etc. Then you could search for the user. But I think it's kind of pointless to just create another page just for this user, just to show the guild ID and then have like an unban button. I think that's kind of pointless. So what we'll do instead is we'll do something even more cooler. We're gonna make it so that when you right click this component, it's gonna show a custom menu, and that custom menu will allow you to select options. So for example, if you know on Discord, if you go on Discord, if you were to right click a message, or if you right click really anything on Discord, it will usually show a custom menu, and that's actually called a context menu. So for example, right now if I right click, you can see that this is the browser's default behavior, also known as displaying the context menu. Okay, this is the browser's context menu, and I could obviously select any option here. But if we want to create our own custom context menu when we right click on a component, we can definitely do that. So this is actually going to be pretty fun. I've done this before, not with the Discord dashboard, but I've done it in general before. So I'm going to show you all how to do that. So let's go ahead and get started. So essentially what we want to do is we want to make it so that when we right click this component or any guild band card component, it's going to display a custom context menu. Okay, the first thing that we'll need to do is we'll need to create a custom styled component to actually define like the shape and like the colors and everything, basically like a custom component for the context menu. Okay, so what we'll do is we'll go inside styles, the styles folder, we'll go inside index.tss, tsx, not tss, tsx, and we'll create a custom component called context menu container. Okay, and so this component is going to be pretty special. So it's going to have a position of absolute, and the reason why it's going to be absolute is because this context menu should be able to literally be positioned absolutely, which means we're going to make it so that it can be positioned anywhere on, basically wherever we right click, that's where the context menu should be placed. So if I right click right over here, the context menu will appear over here. If I right click down over here, the context menu will appear wherever my cursor is. Okay, so we're going to first set the position to absolute. We'll go ahead and set a background color. For now, I'll just do like a darkish color. Oh, that's a white color. Let me change it to a dark color. There we go. And I'll give it a border radius of 5 pixels. Okay, and we'll give it some height. So for now, I'll leave it as auto. The width, we'll leave that as 200 pixels. And then let's make sure we have box sizing, border box. The most important part here is we set the top and left property. So if you're familiar with the top and left property, basically you typically use this whenever you set the position of something to absolute. So for example, if we were to set the top property, that basically tells this property will allow us to position the element from the top X amount of pixels. So for example, if I did top 50 pixels, it would position this element 50 pixels from the top. Now, the top not necessarily being the top of like the browser window, it's actually the top of the relative parent. So if we actually have a parent component of context menu container that has a position of relative, and let's say for example that component is in the center, it would actually be 50 pixels from the top of that parent component. So it wouldn't actually start from the top of the browser window, it would actually start from the top of that parent component. So that's something that I want to definitely mention because not everyone is familiar with that, so I want to mention that very quickly. But because our context menu container, it's not really going to have any parent component, so we don't have to worry about that. So when we do, let's say for example, if we did top 50 pixels, it would actually style it from the top 50 pixels. Okay, but if we were to render this context menu container, let's say if we did that inside this container over here, well, there's already some padding up top over here, so it'd actually be 50 pixels from here going down. So if you want to read more about CSS position property, you can go over to the MDN web docs and you can find the position property under cascading style sheets. Definitely recommend you check that out if you want to learn more about that. Okay, so obviously we're not going to hard code the values for top as well as the left property, because top and left are the two properties that we're going to need to set up, so that way we can actually dynamically position the context menu container. So how do we actually dynamically set the top and the left position? Well, because we're using styled components, since we're using styled components, we can actually just pass in props to this component. So what we'll do first is I'll set it up so that we can take in some props. So the only props that we'll really need is top and left. So I'll go ahead and create a custom type called context menu container props. And it's going to take in top, which is just going to be a number, and left number. Cool. So that should be it. Let's go ahead and type annotate our style component now. And what we do next is we go ahead and we can reference the props inside our style component very easily, like this. Okay, so we're gonna get top and then left, and then we can use the arrow function, and we're gonna use the CSS function, which comes from the style components library. So that should be imported up top over there. You can see that it's being imported over here. Okay, and we can actually use this to define a body of CSS styles, and we're doing this dynamically. So for example, for top, we're going to interpolate the value of top and add pixels, concatenate pixels at the end, because it's going to be a number and then pixels. So for example, if top is 50, it'll be 50 pixels. Same thing with left. Okay, so essentially what's going to happen, let me just see. I don't know why my Visual Studio Code is a little bit slow. I just want to make sure that this is, in fact, working. I think, yeah, there we go. Okay, so essentially what's going to happen is whenever we pass in props to this context menu container, it's going to go ahead and render that context menu container absolutely. It's going to position it absolutely, and it's going to position it based off of the top and left values. Okay, so what we're going to do right now is I'm going to go inside my my application, and I'll just show you how this is going to look like. So let's go ahead and do context menu container, and we're going to pass in the top property. So let's pass in 50, and left, let's pass in 50. And let me see if anything gets rendered out. Something should get rendered out. Let's see. There we go. Okay, yeah, so okay, that's fine. So we can see that I think it's because we have a height of auto, which is why it doesn't actually render out anything unless we put something in the actual container. But that's okay. It's obviously supposed to work that way. Let me change up the background color just a little bit, because that's a little bit too dark. Okay, but you can see it up here. Okay, and you can see that it's actually equally positioned top and left, starting from the top of the document. Okay, if I were to put 150, 150, you would see that it would now be positioned absolutely over here. Let's try left 250. Let's try 450. But you can start to imagine, right? Wherever I am to right click, right, wherever my cursor is and I'm right clicking over there, that's where the context menu should appear. And it'll only appear when I right click on the user band card component. Okay, so hopefully this little demonstration makes sense. So you can kind of like play around with it, and you can imagine that if I right click over here, we just need to make it so that it'll actually show this context menu. And then we can have it show like the actual options that will allow the user to click on. All right, so the next thing that we have to do is whenever we right click on the user band card component, it should first remove the default context menu that comes from the browser. And we need to actually programmatically, or not programmatically, but I should say dynamically display our own context menu. Okay, so how do we actually do that? So there's actually an event that we can listen to on the user band card component. It's called on context menu. Okay, and this event is fired whenever we open up the context menu. So let me show you how that works. So I'm going to go ahead and just console log context menu opened. Okay, and if you want to do stuff with the event object, we can. But let me just show you what happens right now. So I'm going to right click on the context menu. You can see that it says context menu opened. If I right click again, anywhere inside the user band card component, it will go ahead and fire that callback function that is invoked whenever we open up the context menu. Okay. If I were to right click outside the context menu, notice how nothing happens. So what we have to do here is first, let's go ahead and remove, well, not really remove, but let's go ahead and make it so that it doesn't display the default context menu. So we can do that by simply just referencing the event object and calling prevent default. So this will literally just prevent the default behavior of the browser. So it's similar to when you work with forms, and if you click on the submit button, the default behavior of the browser is to literally submit that form. So it'll make a post request to the URL that you had provided in the action for the action attribute. In this case, it will just open up the this will open up the context menu, but we're going to prevent that default behavior. Okay, so if I right click now, you'll see that the callback function is fired. Okay, but since we called event.prevent default, it's not going to go ahead and open up the context menu. So that's how we can get rid of the browser's context menu. Like I'm right clicking right now, and you can see that it's being logged in the console, but it's not opening up the context menu. If I remove that line, it's going to open it up again. Okay, let's bring it back. Nothing's happening. But if I right click outside of the user band card component, it'll open up the context menu. And it's obvious because we are not listening to the context menu event for the whole document or the whole container, just the user band card component. Okay, so what do we do next after we get rid of the default context menu? So what we need to do next, this is actually going to be a little bit tricky, so I'll walk you all through this. Okay, so whenever we right click on the context menu, we need to go ahead and actually display the context menu. Okay, so we can actually keep some state. So let's say, for example, we can go up here to let's go over here. Let me actually remove this console log. Okay, let's go over here, and I'll create a state variable, and this will just be a Boolean value. Okay, and we'll go ahead and name this state variable show menu set show menu. And it should be pretty obvious what we're going to use the state variable for. But if it isn't, I'll explain. So what we'll do is we'll conditionally render the context menu based off of the value of show menu. So show menu is a Boolean, is going to be a Boolean value, so true or false, right? So currently the state of show menu is going to be false. It will be false whenever we initially load the page. But what we'll do is whenever we right click on a user band card component, we'll set the state of show menu to true, and that should open up the context menu. So let's set show menu to true. So because our context menu container is positioned absolutely, what we can actually do is we can actually just put the component anywhere inside this guild bands page component, but we don't want to put it inside user band card or inside this bands.map, because that's actually going to render multiple context menus. It's going to render one context menu container for every user band card, and we obviously don't want that. So we'll actually just put that outside of this dynamic render. So what we'll do is outside of these curly braces over here, basically outside of bands.map. We'll go ahead and get the context menu container. And we are going to have to put some stuff in there. So what we'll do is we'll also pass in top and left for now, just temporarily, until we actually, because what we'll need to do, and I'll explain this in the next step, but let me go ahead and just render an unordered list. Whoops. Okay. So this is what it looks like. So let me actually refresh. Okay, I think I was unauthenticated, but that's okay. I'm not sure why, but that was kind of weird. Anyways, right now you can see that we have the context menu over here. Now let me go inside the code, and if I were to take this whole thing, let me go ahead and conditionally render this now. So we're going to conditionally render it whenever show menu is true. So show menu truthy and context menu container. So this will only render if show menu is true, because with the and operator, we need to have both show menu and this component truthy. So you can see right now it's not being rendered. If I right click, however, because when we right click, the on context menu event is triggered, we call set show menu, and then show menu becomes true. So that way it'll actually it'll render the context menu now. Okay, so that's pretty cool. Now we don't want to actually position this at where it is right now. Obviously, we want to position it wherever we right click. So wherever our cursors and we right click there, that's where the context menu should be placed. Okay, so what we're gonna do next is we're gonna actually go back to this on context menu callback function over here. Okay, and what we want to do is we need to get the coordinates of where we are right clicking. Now, how do we get that? Well, if you actually reference the event object, there's actually a property called page X and page Y, and that'll give you the coordinates. Okay, and what we're gonna do is we're gonna create another state variable, and I'll call this points, set points, and I'll just go ahead and set a use state for this. Okay. And what we'll do is we'll set the default values of X and Y to be 0 and 0. Okay. And we'll go inside on context menu, and we'll call set points, and we'll set the value of X to be e.page. It's going to be e.pageX, and then Y will be e.pagey. Okay. And then from here, now that we are updating the state of points, we can actually just pass in points. We can actually just pass in the values of points. So for example, for top, we're going to go ahead and pass in. So for top, we're going to pass in points.y, right? Because it's for the top, it's vertical, right? So it makes sense to use points.y. For left, it'll be points.x because it's horizontal. Okay, so now let's try again and let's see what happens. So notice how if I right click anywhere else outside of the user band card, nothing happens. I right click here, wherever I right click, that's where the context menu will appear. Okay, pretty cool. Let me go back to here, right click there. Okay, all right, now I went ahead and I actually created a couple of more Discord bots, right? I just and I just banned them on my server. As you can see over here, I just created a couple more, and I just banned a couple. I can just ban this one as well, just for testing purposes, right? If I were to refresh, let's go back to, there we go. So I can right click on any one of these cards, and wherever I right click, the context will show up, or the context menu. If I right click in between, you'll see that it doesn't work, which is good. Okay, so we're not done yet. So let's actually tidy this up just a little bit before we actually get to implementing this unbanned user action. Okay, so what we'll do is first we actually need to create some state to keep track of which guild ban type has been or which guild ban type has been selected. I shouldn't say selected. I should say which guild ban type is the context menu open for. And the reason why that's important is because when we select certain actions, we'll know which guild user to unban, for example, right? So let me go ahead and do selected ban, set selected ban. And if you want, you can honestly try to find a way to encapsulate all of this data in like a hook, but I'm not going to do that for this episode. So what we'll do is whenever we go ahead and whenever the on context menu event is triggered, we're going to set the value of set selected ban to ban, just like that. Now it's not going to let us because we need to actually type annotate this. So let's do that. Guild ban type. And there you go. So here's what I'm going to do. Let me do guild ban, or wait, selected ban. Let me just show you how this is going to look like. So if I right click here, Yahoo News. If I right click here, test bot. If I right click here, test bot 2. Right click here, vein. Okay. If I right click anywhere else, it doesn't update the state of selected ban, which is good. So we know 100% that selected ban is in fact being updated. Okay. So the moment we right click on a card, we get the latest selected ban. We get the latest value of the ban that's been selected, and then we can go ahead and click unban user, and we'll know which user. We'll know what the user, who the user is that we want to unban. That's why this is important. Okay. Next, what we should also do is we should also make it so that if we click anywhere else on the document, it will actually remove the current context menu from the DOM. So we can do that by listening to an event, listening to the click event on the window. But we're going to go ahead and use the use effect hook, because essentially we're trying to perform this effect inside the use effect hook. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to create a function called handle click. And all this is going to do is just call set show menu and set this to false. And we're going to register this event, the click event, on the window, and we're going to just pass in handle click. Okay. And one thing that we should also do is we should clean up our use effect hook. So we can actually just return a function that will be invoked whenever the component unmounts. So essentially what we want to do when the component unmounts is we want to remove the event listener. And this is definitely necessary. It's also really good practice. So if you're not doing this, you should definitely do that. Okay, so when the component unmounts, it'll remove the event listener. Okay, so watch this. I'm going to go ahead and select our server. If I right click, I'm going to left click. You can see that it disappears. Okay, see that it disappears. Okay, now let me go back here and let me just do selected ban and select ban.user.username. Let me just show you. So I'm going to right click. Well, let me refresh because it's still using the previous state. Okay, right click, Yahoo News. If I left click, still the state of selected ban is still the same. We can also make it so that if we left click, right, if we left click, it'll reset the state of selected ban. But we don't really need to do that because the only way that they'll be able to unban the user is they have to right click anyway, so it doesn't really matter. And whenever we right click any of these cards, it'll update the state. Okay, so now what I can do is I can left click, the context menu disappears. Okay, so that is pretty much it. So hopefully this makes sense. What we'll do in the next episode is we'll make it so that what we're gonna have to do is we'll make it so that when we click on unban user, it'll actually make an API call to the backend, and it'll actually just unban the user. Okay, like it'll unban the user from from our Discord server. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense. So that's what we'll cover in the next episode, where we'll make this clickable, and we'll style up the context menu just a little bit, so that way it looks a lot better. So once again, thank you for watching, and I'll see you all in my next episode. Peace out.